A while ago, a good friend of mine announced she was pregnant, and as a long term crafter, my first question, of course, was how can I, as a knitter, make this pregnancy about myself? My name is Janet, and this is making the Stardust throw. All joking aside, of course, our pregnancy announcements are great, but again, all joking aside, my first thought was, what can I make for my friend? And that's a question that we can see come up on all of the knitting communities online all the time. And because I have no children of my own, but so I look at these communities, and lots of other parents said that they can never really have enough baby blankets. So I just trust them, and that's what I made. So I went looking for a nice blanket that I can make for a friend. I looked at so many different patterns, and at the end, I kind of decided on what is called the Stardust Throw by Martin Story, which is just a lovely little blanket that has cables. There's a lot of seed stitching involved to create stars, hence the name, the Stardust Throw. And so I really like the look of it. I got the pattern for free on the Rowan website a while ago. I think they had some kind of thing in spring, April time, sometime in spring, where all of the patterns on the Rowan website were free. So I looked at all of the patterns they had, and this one really jumped out at me because I really liked the look of it. What I kind of didn't like, oh no, I did like the stars, but the stars were made out of seed stitch. So, but I pretty much immediately knew I didn't want to do it just the way this pattern was presented to me, because also I knew that I like to show off my skills. I knew I wanted to make it not just one color. So the pattern was just in blue, and I knew I didn't want to make it just one color. So I started thinking about how can I incorporate color into this. I also knew that my pregnant friend, she's expecting a boy, so blue is good. I know colors shouldn't be gendered, and I don't really confirm to it, but at the same time, I really like the color blue. So I might have made it in blue anyway because I just like the color so much. Um, but yeah, it was a good, a lucky coincidence that it was going to be a boy. But at the same time, I already had a lot of white yarn that I had bookmarked or earmarked for a baby blanket ages ago. But when I was just in the mood of making baby blankets and just buying yarn, thinking that I might use it someday for a blanket, um, but didn't know what kind of color I wanted, so I just bought a lot of white yarn. So I had a lot of white, beautiful yarn lying here, but I also, as I said, I knew I didn't just want to make it one color. So I started thinking about how can I incorporate color into this pattern. And my first thought was that this pattern so you have the stars, but the stars are separated by cables. So you have these vertical cables running around the whole length of the blanket. And my first thought was to make the cables in blue. And yeah, so have the base as a white blanket and have blue cables. So I got some blue color or blue yarn to match my white yarn, and I started making it. And what happened is that I absolutely hated it, pretty much. So I started making the cable, I started knitting the blankets, and it's a big blanket, it's a baby blanket, but it's also very big. So I had to cast on, what was it, 240 stitches, somewhere around there. I started I started on the border of the blanket, and I started making the cables in blue, and that did not work out. I I worked on the blanket for a few days. I just basically hated it almost immediately, and it wasn't good. So because I hadn't done a lot, I didn't feel too bad about frogging the blanket. I mean, it happens, right? You have an idea in your head, and I've not seen anybody making a blanket like this. Uh, it just didn't work out. So I lost a few days of work, but I didn't feel too bad about it. I didn't like it anyway. So I started going back to the drawing board and just thinking, how can I do it now? I do have already have the blue yarn, so I need to use it because I bought it. I mean, uh, as a knitter, you probably know that's not a reason to use it because we all have a stash. Anyway, I digress. So I've thought about making the stars instead of seed stitching the stars. I'm just going to make the stars blue, but I also thought I'm not going to make every star blue. So altogether there were supposed to be, I believe, 9 rows of stars. There's 5 stars in a row, so 45 stars altogether. So I thought I'm just going to do every other star, I'm going to make a blue. Yeah, so, and that's how I started. So, and I've made a lot of socks, like lots of other people. So I thought, oh, I'm quite good with stranded knitting. Of course, the thing is that in a sock you knit in around, right? So whereas a blanket you knit flat, and because it's only every other star, so it's not everywhere around the blanket that you have the color. You just have stars. And I should mention this, I have 3 different blues. So it wasn't just that the stars were blue, there were different blues as well. So I couldn't just use the same yarn for every row, so because every star had a different yarn. So I was sitting there with already uh, up to 4 different balls of yarn just to make this. And I started stranded knitting because I thought that's the easiest way to do it. Just catch the floats. And that is where I had my next problem, because the floats didn't look good at all. So I started with this thing. I started stranded knitting, and after the first row of stars, I just looked at it and I thought it doesn't look very good. So it looks okay, it's not great. Even with catching the floats every other stitch or every 3 stitches, it was puckering too much for me. So I didn't like the look of it. So I thought, how can I do it better without having to catch the stars? And I just came to realization that probably double knitting in this case, or reversible knitting, is the way to go, which means that instead of catching floats and stranding, I'm just going to double knit, which, if you don't know double knit, it means you do every knit twice. So basically one of the every stitch is worked twice. So which at this point already, when I decided to start double knitting in the second row of stars, meant I had to pretty much double the stitches I had on the needle, because now half of them are in a color. And I started doing that, and it looked so much better, no floats, no puckering, no anything. Everything, the stars just looked so amazing. So I knew, okay, that is great, that is exactly what I need. So forget about stranding, just do the double knitting. And I started knitting happily away on my double knitting, and I did a few other tweaks. So the next row of stars, that is the 3rd row of stars out of 9, I made a few tweaks because usually with double knitting, what you do is you knit 1 stitch, you purl the next, you knit 1 stitch, you purl the next. So the purling is always the one in the background and on the back of the work, and the knitting is always the thing that faces you on the right side, so it doesn't matter, right? But then on the 3rd row I switched up so that I purled the background or the back color first and then knitted the front color, which at the end of it, so why I did this is when I finished the star in the row, the way I could knit them together, the way I could bind off the colored yarn, looked a lot better. So that's why I tweaked that. Then on the 3rd row, I did a few other tweaks. I don't even remember what I tweaked then. I just remember I tweaked more things on the 4th row, not the 3rd, on the 4th row. I tweaked the double knitting again a bit, and with every tweak, the stars looked so much better. So it was absolutely worth it. Of course, I should have swatched it before, which I did a swatch before I even started. I did a swatch, but only in the white, just to see how big the stars are going to be. So I could have or could see how big the blanket is going to be at the end. So, and it was kind of what the pattern said. The pattern said it's going to be like 90 by 120, and that was kind of the gauge that I had also when I did my swatch. But as I said, I did my swatch in the white, in just the white, not the color, the double knitting, and I should have done it. But the thing is, in the beginning when I swatched it, I was thinking about just doing the cables in colors, so that's why I didn't swatch it, which also I should have done, because then I would have noticed that I don't like it, so I would never even started it. But anyway, so now I was 4 rows in, just doing tweaks to my double knitting technique, and just seeing, this looks amazing, this is exactly what I want it to look like, it's brilliant, it's the way it looks on the right side is great. So I started the 5th row out of 9, and I was like, yeah, that's amazing. For the first time, I was happy about the way I made everything. So everything now was in a perfect place, exactly the way I wanted it to be. I was just looking at the blanket, I was just thinking, oh, this looks amazing on the right side. Turn it around, and on the wrong side, you could just see, as I said, I started out with stranded knitting in the beginning, changed to double knitting, made tweaks again, and you could just see it in on the wrong side. You could see it. It looked such a mess. But I just kept going on because I thought, okay, the right side looks nice. It looks great. I just kept knitting and knitting and knitting, and but with every row I made, I got unhappier because the wrong side just looked so messy. And because this is a gift, and here that comes in, right? It's a gift. It's supposed to be as near perfect as it can be. I know this is going to be a handmade gift. It's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be machine knit. It's never going to be industrial knitting. I knew it wasn't going to be absolutely stitched perfect. But looking at the 5th row of stars that I was making, and looking how good it looked, and even the 4th and 3rd row, how good they looked compared to the first 2 rows, I knew I could definitely get, you know, I'm capable of going to a standard that I'm really happy about. And I just hadn't heard it in the beginning of the knitting. So after about working on it, I think about 2 months, or almost 2 months, I kind of decided to completely frock the whole thing and start new, because I wanted it to be as good as I can possibly make it, and I knew I could make it very good, but the thing I had on my needle right now wasn't very good, so I wasn't happy with that at all. And I think there's a way of, you get very complacent when you knit a lot like myself, but I knit for myself. I don't care about mistakes I make. I'm just like, oh, it's hand knitting, it's handmade, you know, there's a mistake, who cares, nobody's going to even notice it. I'm the only person who notices it. And so I never really, so when I make a mistake, even with this blanket, I was just like, oh, that's fine. But then the mistakes just kept piling up, and because it is color work, every mistake you do in color work knitting is immediately noticeable. So that was pretty much a problem. Again, it was my choice to make it a color work. The original pattern didn't say it was color work. It was just one color and seed stitching. Great, looked amazing actually. I made it a lot more complicated, and I made it in a way that is, as I said, immediately noticeable if there is a mistake. So I wasn't happy with it. And after, as I said, after about 2 months or a month and a half, and basically halfway done, because I was in row 4.5 of stars out of 9, so I was halfway done. I decided to frock it all, completely start new. So that's what I did. So that was my 3rd attempt then. But at this point, I had actually started this whole project 2 other times and started anew. So the only thing I kept was the border, because there's a ribbed border. So I frocked it down to the border, which at this point was like about this much, or more, probably more actually. So I frocked it all, and just the border. I kept the border, picked up the stitches on the border, and started new. And what I did this time, I started double knitting immediately. And one of the problems I had with the double knitting that wasn't making me too happy is because, as I said, I had every other star. So out of 5, every other star was always in a color. So there were 3 colored stars in one row and then 2 in the next, and so on and so forth. You get it. But because of the constant switching of the colors as well, and the way it all looked, some of the stars were just white, so the fabric was of course a lot thinner than the other stars, where it was double knitting and twice as big. So you could, that also didn't make it look too great. So I was quite happy with the way it looked, but it wasn't great just because of the thickness of the fabric. So what I decided on attempt number 3 is to make every star in blue. So instead of just half of them, every one now got made into blue. Also, it was continuous. Before, I always started with the color when the star actually started, and then bound the color off, the colored yarn off when the star was finished. So then I had about 4 rows of just white. So again, the fabric was much thinner. It's not just that you can feel it, you could see it from the other side, from the right side. You could see it, that the fabric is thinner. Of course you can see that. So it didn't look as great as it could be. So what I decided on the whole attempt number 3 is to double knit every star and have it continuous as well. And then I started again. So that's just what happens, right, with knitting. If you want it to be as perfect as it could be, which also meant that I had kind of planned in the beginning it probably is going to take me 2 months, because I started over so many times. It took me longer than 2 months. It's just what it is. It took me about, I think, what did it take? June, July, August, September. So about 4.5 months altogether. I went on holiday twice in between, so I don't count a few of these weeks because I didn't take the knitting with me, this knitting with me. But yeah, so I just kept on knitting, completely new. And this time it looked great. Also this time what I did is every time I noticed I made a mistake, I went back and fixed the mistake immediately. As I said before, I got kind of complacent, just was like, okay, that's okay, it's hand knitting, who cares? But yeah, this time, whenever I noticed a mistake, I fixed them immediately, or as quickly as I could. So when I didn't make a stitch in the right color, I just went back, let it down to fix it. The end result of which is now a blanket that I really enjoy looking at. So, and it's not just the right side. The right side, of course, looks amazing. It's a white bag thing with all of these lovely blue stars thrown upon it. Looks amazing, but also actually the wrong side looks really good. Like, it looks really good because you have these stripes of stars, and of course now blue, so you have the white stars on a dark blue background. It looks amazing. Even the wrong side of the new blanket looked so much better. So even though I lost 2 months of work and had to, as I said, to restart it, and it's never great to restart something, especially if you're halfway there and it's a big thing. It's not a scarf, it's a blanket. So it's just really frustrating. But the result of it looked so much better, and now it looks like something I'm really proud of, you know. So I'm going to give this to my friend, hopefully tonight. Hopefully I'm going to see her tonight, and I'm going to hand it over, and I really hope she likes it. And if she doesn't, I really hope she doesn't tell me she doesn't like it, because I am so proud of it. I'm just looking at this blanket. It's amazing. It's beautiful. The only thing that I don't like about the blanket at the end of the day is the actual size, because it is a baby blanket. Baby blankets aren't supposed to be really big. So I looked it up and they said ideally a baby blanket is about 70 by 70 if it is a square, or so that's in centimeters, 70 centimeters, or 70 by 90 centimeters if it is like a crib or pram blanket, so that you just cover, which isn't of course very big. It's not a blanket for an adult, so it's not, can't have the size that you would have as an adult. The blanket I have now, I made it in a square size, is almost 1 meter by 1 meter, which is big. It's very big for baby. It's very big, and it's not just big because I used cotton, which also not the greatest choice if you want to make anything color work. Cotton, not a great color work yarn. But cotton is, the problem with cotton is that it's heavy. So you need a lot of yarn for a project this size. So, and because again, it's quite big. So the whole blanket is about, I weighed it yesterday, it's almost 700 grams, which is a pound and a half, I believe. So it's big. It's not big, it's heavy. So it's too heavy for a baby, pretty much. So I made a note for my friend when I give it to her tonight to tell her, do not use the blanket to cover the baby, not as a newborn, because the blanket is going to be too heavy for a newborn. What I found out in my research is a blanket is a good size or a good weight if the baby can basically move it, if they can move their arms underneath the blanket and get, you know, if they feel too warm, can get rid of the blanket. So that's a good size. And this blanket, as it is right now, is too heavy for a baby. However, you can of course use the blanket to put the baby down somewhere. Like if you want to place it on a couch, on a bed, and you just want to put down a blanket, this is a perfect blanket for it. So it's because it is so big, so the baby can just move around. I mean, I know babies can't move that much other than their hands and little legs. They're not going to crawl, but anyway, so it's perfect for that. It's just too heavy to use as a blanket to cover you, to keep you warm. But I'm hoping my friend has other blankets. So probably that is why all the parents of all of these internet communities say you need so many different blankets, because yeah, they all have a different purpose. So yeah, that's my blanket now, and I'm pretty sure you might want to see it now. So I have it here. I keep looking at it all the time. So I'm going to just show you my amazing little Stardust throw, which I'm not going to use as a throw, or maybe my friend is. But basically, this is it. I'm going to put a picture of it on the screen now to show you the whole thing. So that's the right side, and as I said, the wrong side, I love the wrong side so much. So this is the wrong side, and you can see it looks great. So what I'm thinking I might want to do, because I love this pattern so much, I loved working on this whole blanket so much, I was thinking of basically doing the wrong side, the blanket as the wrong side. So just as a dark background and white stars, because look at this looks great. Even just with these different colors, these horizontal stripes and vertical stripes, I think it looks amazing. As I said, I'm just so happy with the result now, that I feel like, yes, I had to start again. I lost 2 months of time, but I'm so happy with it. I'm so happy to present this to my friend. I hope she likes it. As I said, I'm sure she will, actually, because it is beautiful. Who wouldn't like it? Yeah, so I used cotton. What I did is I had this fabulous Debbie Bliss Eco Baby cotton yarn. I've bought this years ago, earmarked for baby blankets. I've already had 5. I think I had 5, because I thought like 500 grams, that's not 500, 250 grams is enough for a baby blanket. That was young, naive me, not thinking that cotton is heavy, and just because you have 50 grams or 250 of it, it doesn't really mean anything with cotton. This is quite thin cotton, but still you only get like 100 meters out of it, which is not enough, 125 meters. So I had to keep rebuying things. So at the end, I bought 12 balls of these. I only used 10, and I also had so for the colors, I actually used paint box yarns, which is a lot cheaper, pretty much. So that was the thing. These weren't too expensive. I think they were like £3.50 or £4 per ball. But again, I used 10 or 12. I actually bought 12. And paint box only costs half of them. But the real reason is that this one, actually, I looked it up. I knew I needed a few different colors, and they didn't have enough blues. Pretty much that was it. They had 2 blues, or 2 that I liked the look of, and I knew I wanted 3, so they didn't sell enough ones. So for the paint box ones, I used just over 1 ball out of each. So I bought 2 balls out of the blues. So as I said, I had 3 different ones here. I bought 2 balls for each blue, and I still have a lot left. 1 wouldn't have been enough, but at the same time, 2 is much too much. I have so much of this yarn left. Yeah, and mostly I went through the white, which of course makes sense, because most of the blanket is white. Even the double knit, every stitch has been made in white. I've used paintbox yarns before, and I really like them. And the colors are great. They knit up well, so it's a very easy to use yarn. It's also quite cheap. The Debbie Bliss one more expensive, even if both of these yarns are coming from Love Crafts, right? So, but these are the paintbox yarns are their kind of go-to yarns. They have them. Debbie Bliss a bit more, I don't know, not luxury, but yeah, upscale, a bit more upscale. Um, you definitely notice a difference in quality. So this one is nicer. It's just nicer. It's softer. It's nicer. What I didn't like about this one is this. At some point, I counted the plies, so it's 8 ply, and it splits. Like it splits immediately. It splits. It unravels immediately. So not. I can't say it's a lot of fun to work with, just because you have to make sure it doesn't split. Especially me using higher needles. So higher are my go-to needles. And they're sharp. They are just, I mean, it's in the name. They're called higher sharps, which is great for lace knitting. If you want to make lace and have a lot of decreases and things like that, is always great if you have a sharp needle. If you use a yarn that has 8 plies and splits the moment you look at it, not great. Took a lot of concentration not to split the yarn all the time. I still did it so many times. I think, in fact, that's the most common error or mistake I made in the blanket, is you can just see that I split the yarn and then one of the plies is sticking out, which is horrible. But it is what it is, right? So again, I tried to fix it when I saw it. I didn't always see it immediately, and then sometimes I was a bit too lazy to ladder back just to pick up all of the plies. So I just left it in, but it's the most common mistake I made here. So I did crunch the numbers, and I think the whole project has about 91,800 stitches. So I think that's what I knitted, 89,000 stitches, which is a lot once you think about it. It took me, I think I did try and time myself, but I forgot it a lot of the time. I know that all of the rows with the color work took me about 15 minutes for every single row, which was about 340 stitches at this point. So, and with the things that I actually timed myself with, I think that it took me about 70 hours to finish the whole blanket. Just the blanket as it is now, not all of the things that I started when I started again and again. Just this one blanket took me about 70 hours. It took me almost 2 months to make, which, yeah, as you can see, it's about 1 hour, maybe a bit more a day, because again, my stupid arms and wrists hurt. Oh, one of the things that I did in the end, because of the double knitting, so, and we all know that stocking stitch, because this is, in fact, it's stocking stitch at the end of the day, because you purl the one side and knit the other side. What happens is that these stripes were obviously curling inwards on the back. So what I did, once I was finished with the whole thing, I actually sewed down all of the edges, all of the stripes, so that it lies as flat as it is. Other than that, I didn't actually block the blanket at all, so it lies super flat on it, on its own. I just had to sew down the edges, because again, because it was curling, you could see it on the right side. You could see that yeah, the fabric, of course, was a bit thinner just on the edges, just the 2-3 stitches on the edges. But you could see it. It wasn't lying super flat. It wasn't great. So it only took me a few more hours to sew down everything, because I'm hand sewing and I'm not a sewist. So yeah, if you made it so far, thanks for listening to me rambling on about this amazing blanket that I made for my most amazing friend. I'm looking forward to gifting it to her. I'm very much looking forward to seeing the baby on the blanket. It's still a few more weeks till the baby's due, so I have to wait for the first few pictures. But yeah, it's really kept me going all this time just thinking about it. That's one of the things I really enjoyed about making this blanket as well, because yes, it was a lot of work, it took me a lot of time, but I kept thinking about my friend and her baby. It's just, I think there's so much love going into this blanket at the end of the day. I imagine you can feel it. It probably can't, but I imagine you can feel it when you use the blanket the baby should feel very loved because I poured my heart and soul into this blanket. And yeah, as I said, I just hope you can see it. And that's one thing, that something that is machine made can never really replace. So if it comes from a factory, there's no love in there. I hope there's a lot of love in my blanket and makes it worth all of the mistakes that I made. Anyway, thanks for listening. Bye.